The machines kept me alive while my wife discovered her emotional limitations. Catherine explained it through the hospital phone, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used with difficult clients. Hospital visits were too hard for her emotionally. The ICU environment triggered her anxiety. She needed to protect her mental health during this challenging time. I accepted this through the fog of medication and mechanical breathing assistance. Nurses moved around my bed with practiced efficiency, checking monitors that beeped reassurance into the sterile air. Catherine's brief appearances became predictable. 15 minutes of strained conversation, updates about work, promises to return soon, always soon, never today. "Your wife seems very busy," Nurse Tina mentioned during one of her rounds, adjusting my IV with gentle precision. Her tone carried no judgment, just observation. "Important job, I'm sure." "Attorney?" I managed through the oxygen mask. "Rising partner track. Very demanding schedule." Tina nodded, but her expression suggested she'd seen this pattern before. Spouses who couldn't handle the reality of critical care, who found excuses to maintain distance from the uncomfortable truth of mortality. I didn't blame Catherine. Not everyone could sit beside hospital beds and pretend everything would return to normal. Dr. Harrison Cole reviewed my charts during his evening rounds, explaining my progress in terms that mixed hope with caution. Heart surgery at 42 wasn't uncommon, but recovery required patience. My body needed time to remember how to function without mechanical assistance. "Your support system at home will be crucial," Dr. Cole emphasized. "Recovery involves more than physical healing. Emotional stability, routine, familiar surroundings, these factors significantly impact outcomes." I nodded, thinking of Catherine's empty chair beside my bed. Her emotional difficulties would resolve once I returned home. Hospital environments affected people differently. Our apartment would restore her comfort level, eliminate the clinical atmosphere that triggered her anxiety. 3 weeks into my stay, patterns emerged. Catherine's visits occurred during lunch breaks, brief and efficient. She brought updates about her cases, mentioned neighbors who asked about my condition, described the apartment's quiet emptiness. Her phone buzzed constantly. "Work calls," she explained, apologizing as she stepped into the hallway for privacy. "The Peterson case is consuming everything," she said during one visit, checking her phone screen. "Mr. Duval has me working weekends. I barely have time to sleep." Her dedication impressed me. Catherine had always been driven, ambitious in ways that complemented my more practical approach to life. While I managed our small construction business, she climbed the legal ladder with methodical determination. Her success would benefit us both eventually. Elizabeth, my sister, visited more frequently. She brought homemade soup, gossip from the neighborhood, and updates about my business operations. My partner Jake was handling current projects, but new contracts required my personal attention. Clients preferred dealing directly with owners, not intermediaries. "Catherine's handling the stress well," Elizabeth observed during one visit. "I stopped by the apartment yesterday to check on her. She's managing everything." Something in her tone suggested more information, but visiting hours ended before I could explore further. Elizabeth gathered her things with unusual haste, promising to return soon. Her behavior seemed different, distracted, almost nervous. The following evening, Elizabeth returned with her phone in hand. She sat beside my bed without her usual cheerful greeting, her expression serious in ways that made my monitors beep faster. "Robert, I need to show you something," she said quietly. "I took these yesterday when I went to check on Catherine." She handed me her phone, and my world shifted on its axis. The photos were clear, unmistakable. Catherine and a man I recognized from her gym, sitting very close on our couch, his hand on her thigh, her head on his shoulder, wine glasses on the coffee table, the intimate comfort of people who'd shared more than conversation. "His name is Marcus Thornton," Elizabeth said softly. "He manages the fitness center where Catherine has her membership. I did some research after I saw them together. The machines around me registered my elevated heart rate, but my mind processed information with crystalline clarity. Catherine's emotional difficulties with hospital visits, her busy schedule, her phone calls in the hallway, the empty chair beside my bed. "How long?" I asked. "I don't know, but they seemed very comfortable together, very familiar." I stared at the photos until Elizabeth gently retrieved her phone. Marcus Thornton looked younger than me, with the kind of sculpted physique that came from professional fitness training. He wore our household robe, my robe, with casual familiarity. "What do you want to do?" Elizabeth asked. I considered my options through the haze of revelation and medication. Confrontation seemed premature without additional information. Catherine's emotional difficulties suddenly made perfect sense. Hospital visits were inconvenient when someone else occupied your time and attention. "I want to go home," I said. "The doctors said another week minimum. I want to sign myself out, against medical advice if necessary." Elizabeth studied my face, recognizing the determination that had built our family business from nothing. When I made decisions, I followed through completely. "Are you sure about this, Robert?" "Very sure. Catherine's emotional difficulties are about to become much more challenging." Dr. Cole arrived within minutes of my request, carrying forms and wearing his serious expression. He explained the risks of early discharge, the importance of continued monitoring, the potential complications of premature activity. "I understand the risks," I interrupted. "I'm signing myself out today." "Your wife should be involved in this decision." "My wife has emotional difficulties with hospital environments. I'm making this decision independently." Something in my tone convinced him to stop arguing. He provided discharge instructions, medication schedules, and emergency contact information. Elizabeth arranged transportation, while I signed papers that transferred responsibility from medical professionals to my own judgment. The ride home felt longer than usual, every bump in the road reminding me of recent surgical procedures. Elizabeth drove carefully, glancing at me through the rearview mirror with obvious concern. "Maybe you should call first," she suggested as we approached our street. "Let Catherine know you're coming home early." "I prefer surprises," I replied. Our apartment building looked exactly as I'd left it 4 weeks ago. Same brick facade, same narrow entrance, same worn carpet in the hallway. Elizabeth helped me up the stairs, my movements slow but determined. Recovery would take time, but clarity had already arrived. I used my key quietly, opening the door with careful precision. Voices carried from the living room, Catherine's laugh, a man's deeper response. The television played softly in the background, creating domestic ambience. They sat exactly as Elizabeth's photos had captured them. Catherine wore her silk robe, the one I'd bought for her birthday. Marcus wore mine. Wine glasses reflected afternoon sunlight from our windows. They looked comfortable, settled, like people who'd established routines. Catherine saw me first. Her face moved through several expressions rapidly: surprise, confusion, panic, and finally, a desperate attempt at normalcy. "Robert," she said, standing quickly, "you're home early. The doctors said another week." "Emotional difficulties," I said, stepping into the living room. "I understand they can be very challenging." Marcus stood as well, his athletic frame impressive even in my robe. He looked younger up close, probably early 30s, with the kind of confidence that came from physical superiority. "This isn't what it looks like," Catherine began, but her voice lacked conviction. "It looks like my wife entertaining her boyfriend in our apartment while I was connected to machines," I said calmly. "What exactly should it look like?" The silence stretched between us, filled only by the television's background noise. Catherine's emotional difficulties had found new focus. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, probably calculating his options for graceful exit. "I should go," Marcus said, moving toward the bedroom where his clothes presumably waited. "Yes," I agreed. You should. He disappeared quickly, leaving Catherine and me alone in our living room. She sat back down, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her wine glass. We need to talk, she said. We do, I agreed. But first, I need to understand something. Were hospital visits really too hard for you emotionally? Or was hiding your boyfriend from the nurses the actual difficulty? Catherine's face provided my answer before she spoke. Her emotional difficulties had just become significantly more complicated. Marcus left through our front door wearing his own clothes and carrying his dignity in tatters. He avoided eye contact completely, which struck me as cowardly given the circumstances. If you're going to occupy another man's apartment while he's hospitalized, at least have the courage to acknowledge the situation when caught. Catherine remained on our couch, still wearing the silk robe that now carried different associations. She'd refilled her wine glass, which suggested this conversation might require artificial courage on her part. How long? I asked, settling into my chair carefully. My surgical incisions protested the movement, but I refused to show weakness during this particular discussion. Robert, please understand. How long, Catherine? She stared into her wine glass as if it contained answers to questions she hadn't expected to face today. 3 months, maybe 4. I'm not sure exactly when it started. The timeline placed the beginning of their relationship shortly before my health crisis. While I was experiencing chest pains and scheduling cardiac consultations, Catherine was developing emotional connections with her fitness trainer. The gym, I said. He helped me through a difficult period. You were sick, the business was struggling. I felt overwhelmed by everything. Marcus provided support when I needed it most. Her explanation carried the tone she used with juries, presenting facts in ways that justified questionable conclusions. Catherine had always been skilled at reframing circumstances to support her preferred narrative. Support, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Don't be crude, Robert. This situation is complicated enough without reducing it to something cheap. I studied her face, noting details I'd missed during brief hospital visits. She looked different, younger somehow, more vibrant than I remembered. Her hair was styled differently, her makeup more carefully applied. She'd been making efforts for someone's appreciation. Where were you planning to go with this? I asked. Long term, I mean. Did you expect me to conveniently expire in the ICU, leaving you free to pursue your fitness instructor? That's horrible. I never wanted anything bad to happen to you. But my hospitalization certainly made things convenient. Empty apartment, flexible schedule, emotional justification for avoiding your actual husband. Catherine finished her wine and set the glass down with unnecessary force. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Your illness, your business problems, the financial stress. I needed someone who could provide emotional stability. Emotional stability, I said, from a gym manager. Marcus owns his own business. He's not just a trainer. The defensive note in her voice revealed more than she probably intended. Catherine had developed genuine feelings for this man, which complicated the situation beyond simple infidelity. If she'd been seeking temporary distraction, we might have found ways to repair our marriage. But emotional investment suggested deeper problems. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. I need time to think, to figure out what I want. What you want, I repeated. That's interesting phrasing. Most people in your situation might consider what they owe their spouse, their marriage, their commitments, but you're focused on personal desires. Don't lecture me about commitment, Robert. You've been absent from this marriage for years. Your business consumed all your attention, left me feeling like a roommate instead of a wife. Her counterattack was predictable, but not entirely inaccurate. My construction company had required extensive time and energy, especially during the past 2 years. Economic pressures had forced me to work longer hours, travel more frequently, focus on survival rather than relationship maintenance. So you decided to find attention elsewhere, I said. I decided to find happiness elsewhere. There's a difference. The honesty was refreshing. even if the content was devastating. Catherine hadn't simply made a mistake or succumbed to temporary temptation. She'd made a conscious choice to prioritize her happiness over our marriage. "I see," I said, standing slowly. "Thank you for the clarity. Where are you going?" "To rest. Surgery recovery requires adequate sleep, according to Dr. Cole. Unlike some people, I take medical advice seriously." I walked to our bedroom, noting details that had changed during my absence. New sheets, different pillows, unfamiliar cologne scent lingering in the air. Catherine had been entertaining Marcus in our bed, which added insult to the existing injury. Sleep came surprisingly easily despite the circumstances. Physical exhaustion from early discharge combined with emotional shock to create temporary unconsciousness. I woke several hours later to find Catherine gone, along with an overnight bag and several items from her closet. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Sharon's for a few days. Need space to think. We'll talk soon." Sharon was Catherine's closest friend and biggest enabler. If Catherine needed validation for her choices, Sharon would provide enthusiastic support. Their girls' nights had become increasingly frequent over the past months, which now made perfect sense. Elizabeth called that evening to check on my condition. I described the afternoon's events in clinical terms, focusing on facts rather than emotions. "What's your plan?" she asked. "Recovery first, then we'll see what develops." "Robert, you sound different, calmer than I expected." Clarity has that effect. When you understand the actual situation instead of guessing, decision-making becomes simpler. "Are you going to fight for your marriage?" I considered the question carefully. Fighting implied Catherine was worth the effort, that our relationship contained elements worth preserving. But her choices revealed fundamental character issues that couldn't be addressed through counseling or compromise. "I'm going to fight for my dignity," I said finally. "The marriage appears to be over." Elizabeth was quiet for several moments. "Do you need anything? Groceries? Help around the apartment?" "Information," I said, "about Marcus Thornton, about Catherine's activities over the past few months, about anything that might be useful going forward." "I can do that. Be careful. Don't do anything that could cause legal problems." "I understand. Get some rest, Robert. Tomorrow will be challenging enough." She was right. Tomorrow would bring new complications as Catherine's emotional difficulties expanded to include guilt, justification, and probably demands for understanding. But tonight, I had the apartment to myself for the first time in weeks. The silence felt peaceful rather than lonely. I spent the evening reviewing our financial situation, insurance policies, and legal documents. Catherine's legal expertise had structured our affairs efficiently, but she'd also created vulnerabilities that could be exploited if necessary. Her emotional difficulties were about to encounter practical realities. Elizabeth arrived the next morning with coffee and information. She'd spent the evening conducting research with the thoroughness that had made her successful in her accounting career. "Marcus Thornton owns Elite Fitness Solutions," she began, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "He's 34, divorced 2 years ago, lives in the Riverside complex downtown. His ex-wife was named Janelle, and their divorce was contentious." "Contentious how?" "Infidelity. He cheated on her with a client, which ended their marriage and nearly destroyed his business. Janelle made sure everyone knew about his behavior. The pattern was revealing. Marcus had a history of pursuing married women, which suggested Catherine wasn't his first affair with a client. His business model apparently included personal services beyond fitness training. What else? Catherine's been lying about her work schedule. I called her office yesterday, pretending to be a client. Her assistant said she's been taking extended lunch breaks and leaving early several days per week. The Peterson case she mentioned? It was resolved 3 weeks ago. Catherine's deception was more extensive than I'd realized. She'd been constructing elaborate lies to cover her activities, which required significant planning and effort. This wasn't a spontaneous affair, but a carefully orchestrated relationship. There's more, Elizabeth continued. I talked to Mrs. Gellert from downstairs. She's seen Marcus coming and going for weeks. Always during daytime hours, always when your truck wasn't in the parking lot. Mrs. Gellert was the building's unofficial surveillance system, a retired teacher who monitored everyone's activities from her front window. Her observations would be detailed and accurate. What did she tell you? Marcus has been here at least 3 times per week since early February. He usually arrives around noon and stays until late afternoon. Mrs. Gellert assumed he was helping Catherine with something while you were hospitalized. He was helping her, I said. Just not with anything constructive. Elizabeth gathered her papers, organizing information into neat stacks. What are you planning to do with this? I'm not sure yet, but knowledge provides options that ignorance doesn't offer. My phone rang before Elizabeth could respond. Catherine's name appeared on the screen, which meant she was ready to continue our conversation from yesterday. Hello, Catherine. Robert, we need to talk. Can you meet me for lunch today? I'm recovering from major surgery. Lunch meetings aren't really feasible right now. Then I'll come to the apartment. We need to discuss our situation like adults. Our situation, I repeated. That's an interesting way to describe your affair. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. I'll be there at 2 o'clock. She hung up before I could respond, which was typical Catherine behavior. She'd decided we needed to talk, so talking would happen according to her schedule and preferences. Catherine? Elizabeth asked. Coming here this afternoon, probably to explain why her happiness justifies destroying our marriage. Do you want me to stay? No. This conversation needs to happen privately. Elizabeth left reluctantly, making me promise to call if I needed support. I spent the morning preparing for Catherine's visit, which mostly involved organizing my thoughts and managing my expectations. She arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, carrying flowers and wearing her apologetic expression. The flowers were yellow roses, which had been my favorites during our early relationship. Catherine's legal training included understanding how to present evidence effectively. You look better, she said, arranging the flowers in a vase. How are you feeling? Physically or emotionally? Both, I suppose. Physically, I'm recovering slowly but steadily. Emotionally, I'm processing the discovery that my wife has been conducting an affair while I was hospitalized. Catherine sat across from me, maintaining careful distance. She'd dressed professionally, as if this were a client meeting rather than a personal conversation. I want you to understand that what happened with Marcus wasn't planned, she began. It developed naturally during a very stressful period. Naturally, I said. Like a garden that grows without planting or watering. Don't be sarcastic, Robert. This is hard enough without your commentary. I apologize. Please continue explaining how your affair developed naturally. Catherine's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composed demeanor. I was overwhelmed by everything. Your illness, financial pressures, work demands. Marcus provided emotional support when I needed it most. Emotional support that required him to wear my robe in our living room. It became more than friendship over time. These things happen in marriages that have grown distant. Her explanation followed a predictable pattern. External pressures, emotional needs, natural development, inevitable outcome. Catherine was presenting her affair as something that happened to her rather than something she chose to pursue. What do you want from this conversation? I asked. I want us to consider our options rationally. Our marriage has been struggling for years. Maybe this situation provides an opportunity to make changes that benefit both of us. Changes such as? Separation, initially. Time to evaluate what we both want from our futures. If we decide to work on our marriage, we could try counseling. If we decide to end it, we could pursue divorce amicably. Catherine's legal mind was already calculating outcomes, considering strategies that minimized her losses while maximizing her freedom. She wanted my cooperation in facilitating her exit from our marriage. And Marcus? I asked. What about him? Where does he fit into your evaluation period? Catherine hesitated, which provided my answer. She had no intention of ending her relationship with Marcus while she decided whether to repair our marriage. She wanted to maintain both options until she determined which served her interests better. I need time to sort through my feelings, she said finally. I see. You want to continue your affair while deciding whether our marriage is worth preserving. That's not how I would describe it. How would you describe it? I would describe it as taking time to make important decisions without pressure or ultimatums. The conversation was proceeding exactly as I'd expected. Catherine wanted everything: her marriage as a safety net, her affair as an emotional outlet, and my cooperation in maintaining both arrangements. I have a different suggestion, I said. What's that? You can have Marcus or you can have me, but you can't have both while you decide which option you prefer. Catherine's composed expression finally cracked slightly. You're giving me an ultimatum? I'm clarifying the situation. Make your choice, Catherine, but make it now. She stared at me for several long moments, probably calculating which response would preserve the most options. Finally, she stood and gathered her purse. I need more time, she said. Then you've made your choice. Catherine walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Robert, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We can handle this situation maturely if we both try. Maturely, I repeated. Like conducting an affair while your husband recovers from heart surgery? She left without responding, which told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. Catherine had chosen Marcus over our marriage, but she wanted to maintain the illusion that circumstances had forced her decision. I called Elizabeth as soon as Catherine's car disappeared from the parking lot. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as expected. She wants to keep both relationships active while she decides which one serves her better. What did you tell her? I told her to make a choice. She chose Marcus. I'm sorry, Robert. Don't be. Clarity is preferable to confusion, even when the clarity is painful. What happens now? I looked around our apartment, noting details that would soon change completely. Catherine's books, her artwork, her personal items that had accumulated over 8 years of marriage. Soon, these reminders would be gone, leaving space for whatever came next. Now, I said, things get interesting. The next morning brought unexpected complications. I woke to find my truck's tires slashed, the word cheater carved into the paint on the driver's side door. Someone had also poured sugar into the gas tank, which would require expensive repairs. Mrs. Gellert appeared at my elbow as I surveyed the damage, her expression mixing sympathy with obvious curiosity about neighborhood drama. Happened sometime after midnight, she reported. Didn't see who did it, but there was a lot of noise around 2 a.m. Figured it was cats fighting. Did you call the police? Didn't want to bother them over animal noises. But this changes things, doesn't it? I agreed that it changed things considerably. Someone had escalated our situation from personal drama to property destruction, which suggested emotions were running higher than I'd realized. Elizabeth arrived within minutes of my phone call, bringing coffee and her practical problem-solving attitude. She examined the damage with the thoroughness she applied to financial audits. This wasn't random vandalism, she concluded. Someone wanted to send you a specific message. The question is who? Catherine doesn't seem like the tire-slashing type. What about Marcus? I considered the possibility. Marcus had seemed uncomfortable during our brief encounter, but not particularly aggressive. His business depended on maintaining a professional reputation, which property destruction wouldn't support. Maybe. Or maybe Catherine has friends who think I'm the villain in this situation. Elizabeth photographed the damage from multiple angles, creating documentation for insurance claims and potential police reports. Her accounting background had taught her to preserve evidence before attempting solutions. Are you going to file a police report? She asked. I'm going to consider my options first. We arranged for towing and rental car service, which consumed most of the morning. The insurance adjuster confirmed what I already knew. The damage was intentional and extensive. Someone had invested significant time and energy in destroying my truck. Catherine called while I was completing paperwork, her voice carrying artificial concern that didn't mask underlying irritation. "I heard about your truck," she said. "That's terrible. Do you have any idea who might have done it?" "Someone with strong opinions about cheating, apparently. Robert, please don't assume this has anything to do with our situation. You have business competitors, dissatisfied customers, any number of people who might hold grudges." Her immediate deflection suggested she knew more about the incident than she was admitting. Catherine's legal training had taught her to establish alternative theories before accusations could develop. "You're probably right," I said. "It's just coincidental timing." "Exactly. I hope your insurance covers everything." "Most of it. I'll manage the rest." "Good. I'm glad you're handling this maturely." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with the distinct impression that maturity, in Catherine's definition, meant accepting whatever happened without complaint or investigation. That evening, Elizabeth returned with additional information about Marcus Thornton's background. Her research had expanded beyond basic biographical details to include financial records and business relationships. "His gym is struggling," she reported. "Elite Fitness Solutions has been losing money for 8 months. He's behind on rent, equipment payments, and payroll taxes." "How behind?" "Significantly. He owes about $40,000 to various creditors, and his membership base has declined by 30% since his divorce became public knowledge." The financial pressure explained Marcus's interest in Catherine, who represented stability and potential support. Her attorney salary could subsidize his failing business while providing personal benefits as well. "There's something else," Elizabeth continued. "I talked to his ex-wife, Janelle. She was very willing to share information about Marcus's character." "What did she tell you?" "He has a pattern of targeting married women with financial resources. During their marriage, he had affairs with at least 3 clients, all married, all wealthy, all willing to provide financial support in exchange for personal attention." The pattern was clear and disturbing. Marcus wasn't simply unfaithful, he was predatory, using his business to identify and pursue vulnerable women who could provide economic benefits. "Janelle also mentioned that Marcus has a temper," Elizabeth added. "He destroyed property during their divorce proceedings, her car, some furniture, personal items. She had to get a restraining order." "Did she think he might have damaged my truck?" "She said it sounded exactly like his previous behavior. When Marcus feels threatened or cornered, he lashes out at property rather than people." I absorbed this information while considering my response options. Marcus had apparently decided I represented a threat to his relationship with Catherine, which had prompted him to escalate our conflict beyond verbal confrontation. "What are you thinking?" Elizabeth asked. "I'm thinking that Marcus has made a strategic error. Property destruction creates legal vulnerabilities that didn't exist before." "Are you going to press charges?" "I'm going to gather more evidence first. If Marcus wants to play games, he should understand that I know the rules better than he does." The next morning brought another surprise. I arrived at my business office to find the locks changed and a notice posted on the door. According to the document, Elite Construction Services had been reported for various code violations and was under investigation by city inspectors. Jake, my business partner, met me in the parking lot with obvious frustration written across his face. "Someone filed complaints about every job we've completed in the past year," he explained. "Anonymous tips about safety violations, permit irregularities, substandard materials. The city has to investigate everything." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. We can't start new projects until the investigation concludes. Existing contracts are on hold pending inspection results." The timing was suspicious and devastating. Someone with knowledge of construction regulations had filed strategic complaints designed to paralyze our business operations. The anonymous nature of the reports made them difficult to challenge or disprove. Any idea who might have done this? Jake asked. I had strong suspicions, but no proof. Catherine's legal expertise would have provided the knowledge necessary to file effective complaints, while Marcus's financial desperation would have supplied motivation for sabotage. I'm working on it, I said. Work faster, Robert. We can't survive extended shutdown. Employees need paychecks, suppliers want payments, insurance premiums are due next week. I spent the afternoon reviewing our financial situation, which was precarious even before the current crisis. Extended business suspension would force bankruptcy within 60 days, destroying everything I'd built over the past decade. Catherine called that evening, her voice carrying false sympathy that barely concealed satisfaction. I heard about your business problems, she said. That must be very stressful on top of everything else. Someone filed anonymous complaints about code violations. Very detailed, very specific complaints that suggest insider knowledge of construction regulations. That's unfortunate. I hope you can resolve the situation quickly. I'm sure I will. Anonymous complaints usually come from people who lack the courage to sign their names to accusations. Sometimes people file anonymous reports because they fear retaliation. And sometimes they file anonymous reports because they know their accusations are groundless harassment designed to cause financial damage. Catherine was quiet for several moments, probably calculating whether to continue the conversation or end it before revealing too much. I hope you're not suggesting that I had anything to do with your business problems, she said finally. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts and letting people draw their own conclusions. Robert, you're becoming paranoid. Not everything that happens to you is connected to our marriage situation. You're probably right. It's just remarkable how many problems have developed since I discovered your affair. She hung up without responding, which confirmed my suspicions about her involvement in recent events. Catherine and Marcus had decided to pressure me into accepting their relationship by destroying my financial stability. They had seriously underestimated my capacity for strategic thinking. I called Elizabeth and asked her to meet me at the apartment. When she arrived, I had documents spread across the kitchen table: business records, insurance policies, financial statements, and legal papers. I need your help with something, I said. What kind of help? The kind that requires your accounting expertise and absolute discretion. Elizabeth studied the papers, her expression growing more serious as she recognized the implications of what I was planning. Are you sure about this? She asked. Very sure. Catherine and Marcus want to play strategic games. They should understand that I've been playing those games longer than they have. This could get complicated. It's already complicated. Now it's going to get interesting. Elizabeth spent 3 days organizing the financial documentation I needed for my counter-strategy. Her accounting expertise proved invaluable in structuring transactions that were completely legal but strategically devastating. Everything's ready, she reported, spreading the final paperwork across my kitchen table. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed? Catherine and Marcus declared war when they destroyed my truck and sabotaged my business. I'm simply responding with appropriate tactics. The first phase involved restructuring our joint assets in ways that Catherine's legal training should have anticipated, but apparently hadn't. While she was focused on her emotional difficulties and romantic pursuits, I was securing our financial foundation. I started by liquidating our joint savings account, which contained $43,000 accumulated over 8 years of marriage. The money was transferred to a new individual account at a different bank, along with documentation showing Catherine's adultery as justification for asset protection. Next, I canceled all joint credit cards and removed Catherine as an authorized user on my personal accounts. Her shopping habits had always been expensive, but supporting those habits while she conducted an affair seemed unnecessarily generous. The house down payment fund, which we'd been building toward our dream of home ownership, was redirected into a trust account managed by Elizabeth. Catherine would need legal action to access those funds, which would require admitting her adultery in court documents. She's going to be furious, Elizabeth observed. She's going to be surprised. There's a difference. Catherine discovered the financial changes when her credit card was declined during lunch with Marcus. She called within minutes, her voice carrying the controlled rage she typically reserved for opposing counsel. "What did you do to our accounts?" she demanded. "I protected our assets from further unauthorized use." "Unauthorized use? I'm your wife." "You're my wife who's conducting an affair while I recover from surgery. That changes the definition of authorization considerably. You can't just steal our money, Robert. I have legal rights." "I didn't steal anything. I secured marital assets pending resolution of our situation. If you want access to those funds, we can discuss terms." "Terms?" "End your affair with Marcus. Return home. Commit to marriage counseling. Resume being a wife instead of someone else's girlfriend." Catherine was quiet for several moments, probably calculating her legal options. Her expertise would tell her that adultery significantly weakened her position in any financial dispute. "I need time to consider everything," she said finally. "Time is a luxury you've already spent. Make your decision, Catherine." She hung up without responding, which meant she was choosing Marcus over financial security. Her emotional difficulties were about to encounter economic reality. The second phase targeted Marcus's business directly. Elizabeth had discovered that Elite Fitness Solutions owed substantial back taxes to both state and federal agencies. Anonymous tips to tax enforcement officials resulted in immediate audits and asset freezes. Marcus called me that evening, his voice carrying panic rather than the confidence he'd displayed in my living room. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About calling off whatever you're doing to my business." "I'm not doing anything to your business. Tax compliance is your responsibility, not mine." "Don't play games, Robert. I know you reported me to the IRS. I don't know anything about your tax situation, but if you're having problems with federal agencies, maybe you should focus on those instead of pursuing other men's wives. Catherine and I are in love. This isn't just some casual affair." "Love?" I repeated. "How romantic. Does your love include helping Catherine destroy my business with anonymous complaints?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't. Just like you don't know anything about my truck being vandalized." Marcus was quiet for several moments, probably realizing that his financial problems were connected to his personal choices. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to disappear from my wife's life and never contact her again." "That's not going to happen." "Then enjoy your audit results." I hung up before he could respond, satisfied that Marcus now understood the cost of his romantic pursuits. His business would survive the tax investigation if his records were clean, but the process would consume months and thousands of dollars in professional fees. Catherine appeared at my apartment the following evening, arriving without flowers or apologies. She looked tired and stressed, which suggested that reality was intruding on her emotional difficulties. "We need to reach an agreement," she said. "What kind of agreement?" "You stop sabotaging Marcus's business, and I'll discuss our marriage situation reasonably." "I'm not sabotaging anyone's business, but I'm interested in reasonable discussion about our marriage." Catherine sat across from me, maintaining the careful distance she'd established during our previous conversations. Her professional demeanor was intact, but underlying tension was visible in her posture and expressions. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about making choices. And I think we should try marriage counseling, see if we can work through our problems." "What about Marcus? What about him? Are you ending your relationship with him?" Catherine hesitated, which provided my answer. She wanted to attempt marriage repair while maintaining her affair as backup security. "It's complicated," she said finally. "It's simple. You choose our marriage or you choose Marcus, but you don't choose both while you decide which option you prefer. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. Reasonable would be accepting your affair while pretending our marriage might survive. Catherine's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composed expression. I need more time. Time for what? To sort through my feelings, to understand what I really want. You want Marcus. You've made that obvious through your choices over the past 4 months. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're just afraid to admit it because ending our marriage means losing financial security. Catherine stood abruptly, her professional composure finally cracking. You're being cruel, Robert. I'm being honest. There's a difference. She gathered her purse and moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. If you continue attacking Marcus's business, I'll file for divorce and demand half of everything we own. Feel free. Adultery affects asset division in divorce proceedings. Your legal training should have covered that topic. Catherine stared at me for several moments, probably calculating whether threats would be more effective than negotiation. This doesn't have to be a war, she said finally. You declared war when you brought your boyfriend into our bed while I was hospitalized. I'm simply responding with appropriate tactics. She left without further comment, which meant our conversation had achieved its purpose. Catherine now understood that her choices carried consequences beyond emotional satisfaction. I called Elizabeth after Catherine's car disappeared from the parking lot. How did it go? She asked. She wants to maintain both relationships while she decides which serves her better. What did you tell her? I told her that time for decisions had expired. Now she gets to live with the choices she's already made. What's the next phase? I looked around our apartment, noting details that would soon change permanently. Catherine's personal items, her books and artwork, the accumulated evidence of 8 years together. Soon, these reminders would be gone. The next phase, I said, involves public education about the consequences of adultery. The community center's monthly neighborhood meeting provided the perfect venue for my public education campaign. These gatherings typically attracted 30 to 40 residents who discussed local issues, shared information, and maintained the social connections that defined our small community. I arrived early, bringing homemade cookies and coffee that established my reputation as a thoughtful neighbor rather than a bitter husband. Mrs. Gellert helped me arrange refreshments while providing updates on recent neighborhood activities. How are you feeling, Robert? She asked. You look much better than you did after the hospital. I'm recovering well, thank you. Having a strong support system makes all the difference. And Catherine? We haven't seen her around much lately. Catherine's been very busy with work and other activities. Mrs. Gellert's expression suggested she understood the implications of my phrasing, but she was too polite to pursue the topic directly. Her discretion would last exactly until other neighbors arrived and conversations began. The meeting proceeded through standard agenda items: street maintenance, parking regulations, upcoming community events. I participated appropriately, offering constructive comments and volunteering for committees that demonstrated civic engagement. When discussion turned to general neighborhood concerns, I requested permission to address the group about a personal matter that affected community safety. As most of you know, I recently returned from an extended hospital stay, I began. During my recovery, someone vandalized my truck and filed false complaints about my business. I wanted to make everyone aware of these incidents in case similar problems develop elsewhere. Concerned murmurs rippled through the audience. Property crimes were rare in our neighborhood, which made my report particularly disturbing to residents who valued safety and security. Do you have any idea who might have done these things? Asked Mr. Peterson, who lived 3 blocks away. I have strong suspicions based on recent developments in my personal life. I paused, allowing anticipation to build before continuing with carefully chosen words. While I was hospitalized, my wife began a relationship with another man. When I discovered their affair and asked her to choose between our marriage and her boyfriend, someone responded by destroying my property and sabotaging my business. The silence was complete and electric. Neighborhood meetings rarely featured personal revelations of this magnitude. which guaranteed that my story would spread throughout the community within hours. "That's terrible," said Mrs. Williams from the corner. "Who would do such things?" "The man's name is Marcus Thornton. He owns Elite Fitness Solutions downtown. My wife is Catherine Waverly, who works at Duval, Morrison, and Associates." I provided additional details about the timeline, the property damage, and the business sabotage, presenting everything in factual terms without emotional commentary. The audience absorbed information with obvious shock and growing indignation. "What are the police doing about this?" asked Mr. Chen. "I'm still gathering evidence before filing formal complaints. But I wanted everyone to know what was happening in case similar incidents occur elsewhere." The meeting continued for another hour, but my revelation dominated all subsequent conversations. Neighbors approached me individually to offer support, share similar experiences, and request additional details about the people involved. Mrs. Gellert was particularly interested in Marcus's background and business practices. "I've seen him coming and going from your building," she said. "Always during daytime hours when you weren't home. I thought he was helping Catherine with something." "He was helping her," I agreed. "Just not with anything constructive." By the time I left the community center, my story had been shared with 43 neighbors, 3 of whom had connections to Catherine's law firm or Marcus's gym. The information would spread exponentially through social networks, workplace conversations, and casual encounters. Catherine called the next morning, her voice carrying controlled fury that barely masked underlying panic. "What did you do at the neighborhood meeting last night?" I shared information about recent property crimes and business sabotage. Community safety is everyone's responsibility. "You told them about Marcus." "I told them about the vandalism and false complaints. I mentioned that these incidents coincided with your affair because the timing seemed relevant." "You had no right to discuss our private business in public." "Your affair stopped being private when it resulted in property destruction and business interference." Catherine was quiet for several moments, probably calculating the professional damage that neighborhood gossip could cause to her legal career. "People are calling my office," she said finally. "What kind of calls?" "Clients asking questions about my personal life, partners wanting explanations about community rumors. This could destroy my reputation." "Your affair could destroy your reputation. I'm simply providing factual information about recent events." "You're being vindictive and cruel." "I'm being transparent. If you're ashamed of your choices, maybe you should reconsider them." She hung up without responding, which meant my public education campaign was achieving its intended effect. Catherine's emotional difficulties were expanding to include professional consequences. Marcus called that afternoon, his voice carrying desperation rather than anger. "You need to stop talking about me to people," he said. "I haven't talked about you specifically. I've talked about property crimes and business sabotage. My gym is losing members because of rumors about my personal life. Maybe you should focus on fitness training instead of married women. Catherine and I are in love. What we have is real. What you have is expensive. Catherine's discovering that adultery carries costs she didn't anticipate. This isn't over, Robert. You're right. It's just beginning." I hung up and immediately called Elizabeth to report both conversations. "They're feeling pressure," she observed. "Good. Pressure creates poor decision-making, which creates additional opportunities." "What's the next phase?" "Documentation. I want everything recorded, photographed, and preserved for future use." Elizabeth arrived that evening with professional camera equipment and legal forms that would establish official records of harassment and property damage. We spent 2 hours creating comprehensive documentation of every incident since my hospital discharge. "This is thorough enough for court proceedings," she said, reviewing our work. "Court proceedings might become necessary if Marcus continues escalating his response to pressure." "Are you hoping he'll do something stupid?" "I'm preparing for the possibility that desperate people make desperate choices." My preparation proved prescient. The following morning brought new vandalism. this time targeting my rental car. Someone had poured paint stripper across the hood and roof, causing thousands of dollars in damage to the vehicle's finish. Mrs. Gellert had witnessed the incident from her window, providing detailed descriptions of the perpetrator and his vehicle. Happened around 3 a.m., she reported. Young man, athletic build, driving a black pickup truck. He spent about 10 minutes working on your car, then left quickly. Did you get a license plate number? Partial. Started with MXT and ended with numbers I couldn't see clearly. Elizabeth's research had previously identified Marcus's vehicle as a black Ford pickup with license plate MXT4471, which meant we now had eyewitness testimony connecting him to property destruction. I filed a police report immediately, providing Officer Brandt with photographs, witness statements, and background information about the ongoing harassment campaign. His expression grew more serious as he reviewed the evidence. This appears to be systematic intimidation, he concluded. We'll investigate thoroughly and pursue appropriate charges. How long will that take? Depends on what we find, but with this level of documentation, we should be able to move quickly. Catherine called within hours of my police station visit, her voice carrying panic that she couldn't disguise behind professional composure. The police contacted my office, she said. They want to interview me about property crimes. They're being thorough in their investigation. Robert, please don't let this go any further. We can work something out privately. What kind of private arrangement? I'll end things with Marcus. We can try marriage counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Her offer was too little and too late, motivated by fear rather than genuine remorse. Catherine was discovering that choices carried consequences beyond emotional satisfaction. I appreciate the offer, I said, but some situations can't be resolved through negotiation. What do you mean? I mean that Marcus committed crimes, and criminals should face appropriate consequences. He was protecting our relationship. He was destroying property and sabotaging businesses. The motivation doesn't change the legal reality. Catherine was quiet for several moments, probably realizing that her affair had created problems beyond her ability to control or resolve. This is going to destroy everything, she said finally. You destroyed everything when you chose Marcus over our marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. She hung up without responding, which meant our conversation had achieved its purpose. Catherine now understood that her emotional difficulties had evolved into legal complications that threatened both her career and her future. The next phase would determine whether Marcus was smart enough to accept defeat or stupid enough to escalate further. Marcus made his choice 3 days later. I discovered it when I returned from a medical follow-up appointment to find my apartment door standing open and my living room destroyed. Furniture was overturned, electronics were smashed, and personal items were scattered across the floor like debris from an explosion. The message was clear. If Marcus couldn't have Catherine without interference, he would ensure that I paid the maximum possible price for my resistance to their relationship. Mrs. Gellert met me in the hallway, her face flushed with indignation and excitement. I called the police as soon as I heard the noise, she reported. Young man with a crowbar, same one who damaged your car. He was here for about 20 minutes, making terrible racket. Did you get photographs? Better than that. I got video. She showed me her phone screen, which displayed clear footage of Marcus systematically destroying my possessions. His face was clearly visible, his license plate was recorded, and his actions were documented with the precision of professional surveillance. Mrs. Gellert, you're a treasure. I don't like bullies, she said firmly. Especially bullies who pick on people recovering from surgery. Officer Brandt arrived within minutes, followed by a crime scene photographer and detective who specialized in domestic violence cases. They documented everything methodically, treating my apartment like a major crime scene. This is escalation beyond simple harassment, Detective Morrison explained. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, intimidation. We're looking at felony charges. How solid is the case? with eyewitness testimony and video evidence, very solid. We'll have arrest warrants within hours. I called Elizabeth while the police completed their investigation. She arrived immediately, surveying the damage with obvious anger and determination. "This changes everything," she said. "It certainly clarifies things. Marcus has moved beyond harassment into serious criminal behavior. What about Catherine? She has to know about this." "She'll know soon enough. The police will want to interview her about Marcus's mental state and potential for violence." Catherine appeared at my apartment 2 hours later, arriving just as the police were finishing their documentation. Her face went pale when she saw the destruction, and her hands shook as she surveyed the damage. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Marcus did this?" "According to eyewitness testimony and video evidence. I had no idea he was capable of something like this." "Really?" His ex-wife mentioned that property destruction was his typical response to relationship stress. Catherine stared at me with obvious shock. "You talked to Janelle?" "I researched the man who was sleeping in our bed. Due diligence seemed appropriate under the circumstances. Detective Morrison approached us with professional courtesy but obvious suspicion about Catherine's role in recent events. "Mrs. Waverly, we need to discuss your relationship with Marcus Thornton." "What kind of discussion?" "The kind that determines whether you were aware of his criminal activities or participated in planning them." Catherine's legal training kicked in immediately. "I want to consult with an attorney before answering any questions." "That's your right. But cooperation at this stage could influence how we proceed with charges." "What charges?" "Against Mr. Thornton, definitely. Against you, possibly, depending on what our investigation reveals about your knowledge and involvement." Catherine looked genuinely terrified, which suggested she was finally understanding the full consequences of her choices. Her affair had evolved from personal drama to criminal conspiracy. "I didn't know Marcus would do anything like this," she said. "But you knew about the previous property damage?" Detective Morrison asked. "I suspected, but I didn't have proof." "Did you encourage his actions or provide information that facilitated them?" Catherine glanced at me, then back at the detective. "I need to speak with my attorney. We'll be in touch to schedule a formal interview." After the police left, Catherine and I stood alone in my destroyed living room. The silence stretched between us, filled with 8 years of marriage history and recent months of betrayal. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I never wanted anything like this to happen." "But you wanted Marcus more than you wanted our marriage." "I thought I did. But seeing this," she gestured at the destruction around us, "this isn't the man I thought I knew." "This is exactly the man you knew. You just chose to ignore the warning signs because he provided what you wanted." Catherine sat down carefully on the edge of my overturned couch, her professional composure completely gone. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now Marcus faces felony charges for breaking and entering, destruction of property, and criminal intimidation. You face potential charges as an accessory if the investigation determines you provided assistance." "And us?" "There is no us, Catherine. You ended our marriage when you chose Marcus over our relationship. But if I testify against him, if I cooperate with the prosecution, if you cooperate with the prosecution, you might avoid criminal charges. But that doesn't resurrect our marriage." Catherine was quiet for several moments, probably calculating her legal options and their personal costs. "I made a terrible mistake," she said. "You made a series of deliberate choices. The consequences were predictable and avoidable. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked around my destroyed apartment, thinking about the past 4 months of lies, betrayal, and escalating harassment that had culminated in this moment. "Forgiveness is possible," I said finally, "but reconciliation isn't. Some choices can't be undone, Catherine." She nodded slowly, tears finally appearing in her eyes. "I'll pack my things and find somewhere else to stay. Most of your things survived the destruction. Marcus focused on my possessions rather than yours. Even in his rage, he was trying to protect me. Even in his rage, he was trying to control you. There's a difference. Catherine gathered her remaining belongings while I contacted my insurance company and began the process of documenting losses. The material damage was extensive but replaceable. The personal damage was permanent but survivable. Elizabeth arrived as Catherine was leaving, the two women passing in the doorway without speaking. The contrast was striking, Elizabeth carrying cleaning supplies and determination, Catherine carrying suitcases and defeat. "How are you holding up?" Elizabeth asked. "Better than expected. Clarity has advantages, even when the clarity is painful." "What's the next step?" "Recovery, physical, emotional, and financial." "And Catherine?" "Catherine gets to live with the consequences of her choices, just like everyone else." We spent the evening cleaning and organizing, salvaging what could be saved, and discarding what couldn't be repaired. The work was therapeutic, creating order from chaos while providing time to process recent events. Marcus was arrested the following morning at his gym, taken into custody while training a client. The arrest was public and humiliating, which seemed appropriate given his behavior over the past weeks. Catherine called that afternoon to report that she'd hired a criminal defense attorney and was cooperating fully with the prosecution. Her cooperation would likely prevent charges against her while ensuring conviction for Marcus. "I want you to know that I'm testifying truthfully about everything," she said, "including my own role in what happened." That's the right choice. It's too late to make the right choice, but it's the only choice I have left. Sometimes that's enough. 3 weeks later, Marcus pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges in exchange for a sentence that included restitution, probation, and mandatory anger management counseling. His business closed permanently, and his reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Catherine filed for divorce shortly after Marcus's sentencing, requesting only her personal property and accepting full responsibility for the marriage's failure. The proceedings were quick and amicable, ending our 8-year relationship with legal documents rather than dramatic confrontations. I rebuilt my apartment, my business, and my life with methodical determination. The physical recovery from surgery was complete within 6 months. The emotional recovery took longer, but was ultimately more thorough. Elizabeth remained my closest ally throughout the reconstruction process, providing practical support and emotional stability when both were desperately needed. "Any regrets?" she asked one evening as we reviewed the final divorce papers. "About the marriage ending?" "No. About how it ended. Sometimes. You handled everything perfectly. I handled everything legally and effectively. Whether that constitutes perfection is debatable. Catherine made her choices. Marcus made his choices. You simply responded to the consequences of their decisions." True. But response strategies reveal character just as clearly as initial choices do. I signed the divorce papers with the same methodical precision I applied to business contracts, ending one chapter of my life while beginning another. The future remained unwritten, which felt like opportunity rather than uncertainty. 6 months later, I received a letter from Catherine. She'd moved to another city, taken a position with a smaller law firm, and was attempting to rebuild her professional reputation. The letter contained apologies, explanations, and expressions of regret that were probably sincere but definitely irrelevant. I read it once, then filed it away with other documents from our marriage. Some chapters deserved preservation, even when they couldn't be continued. Marcus sent no letters, made no contact, and disappeared completely from my awareness. His consequences were permanent and appropriate, which satisfied my sense of justice without requiring ongoing attention. Mrs. Gellert continued monitoring neighborhood activities from her front window, occasionally sharing updates about former residents who'd moved away under unfortunate circumstances. Her surveillance provided continuity and entertainment in equal measure. That young man with the gym never did understand consequences, she observed one afternoon. Some people have to learn everything the hard way. Some people never learn at all, I replied. True, but the smart ones pay attention to other people's mistakes. Her wisdom was practical and accurate, which made it valuable guidance for future decisions. I'd learned more about character assessment, relationship dynamics, and strategic thinking during the past year than in all previous years combined. The education was expensive but thorough, which made it worthwhile despite the costs involved. Some lessons can't be learned through books or conversations. They require personal experience with consequences and recovery. My new life was simpler, quieter, and more authentic than the previous version. I worked, recovered, and planned without the complications that emotional betrayal had created. The peace was profound and permanent. Elizabeth visited regularly, bringing updates about community activities and family news that connected me to larger networks of relationship and responsibility. You seem different, she observed during one visit. Calmer, more focused. Clarity has that effect. When you understand what matters and what doesn't, decision-making becomes simpler. What matters? Honesty, loyalty, and consequences. Everything else is negotiable. And what doesn't matter? Other people's opinions about choices they didn't have to make. The conversation continued through the evening, covering topics that ranged from practical concerns to philosophical observations about human nature and relationship dynamics. We concluded that most people want predictable outcomes from unpredictable choices, which creates disappointment and resentment when reality fails to accommodate their preferences. Catherine had wanted the excitement of an affair without the consequences of betrayal. Marcus had wanted financial security without the obligations of honest work. Both had discovered that wanting something doesn't make it achievable or sustainable. I had wanted a faithful wife and stable marriage, which had proven equally unachievable under the circumstances. But I'd adapted to reality rather than demanding that reality adapt to my preferences. The difference in approach had determined the difference in outcomes, which seemed like a lesson worth remembering for future reference. Time continued forward, bringing changes that were gradual rather than dramatic. My business recovered and expanded, my health improved completely, and my personal life developed new patterns that reflected current priorities rather than previous commitments. The past remained instructive without being controlling, which felt like the appropriate relationship between experience and possibility. Catherine's emotional difficulties had taught me valuable lessons about character assessment and strategic thinking that would influence all future decisions. The education was complete, and the knowledge was permanent. Marcus's criminal behavior had demonstrated the importance of recognizing escalation patterns and responding appropriately before situations became dangerous. That education was also complete and permanently valuable. Both lessons had been expensive but thorough, which made them worthwhile investments in future security and success. The story was finished, but the life it had changed continued forward with improvement.